I don't have much time, so I broke my talk up into 3 parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and training, the current status of the religious studies program, and then sort of my vision for where I think it can go. As Tom said, I went to UVA. University of Virginia had a very good history department and also a very good religious studies department. And so for my experience in religious studies comes from almost a seamless program with history and religious studies. I was trained in early modern religious history from the Middle Ages on up to about 1800. I've written extensively on religious history. I wrote a book, Civic Christianity, Renaissance Italy, dealing with charity, lay institutions, popular devotions, pilgrimages, things like that. And I've written on more theoretical aspects of religion. I have an article called Miracles and Inconvenient Truth, talking about how historians deal with, I was looking at miracle books, early modern miracle books. At OSU, one of the courses I developed actually is Popular Religion in the West, talking about popular religious practices in Western Europe. I'm currently teaching the Reformation class, and I do a senior thesis honors course on magic and superstition. So I've been trained in religious history and then working in researching and publishing, teaching in religious history now for, it's hard to believe, a couple decades. Right? Let me say something about my administrative experience. You know, this is a director job, so I started to put this list together. I've been on way too many committees in the last 20 years. But one of the good things about being on university and college committees is you meet faculty from across the college. So one of the things I think this director position is going to have to do is reach out to different departments, even reach out to different colleges and pull in expertise. I've done some outside program reviews for different universities. The most relevant, I think, in terms of administrative experience for this position is I was director of graduate studies for 4 years in the history department. And this is what I learned doing that, and what I did as grad director, I think, is what I applied directly to the religious studies position. So the grad department, we have about 20 TAs, about $250,000 used to be the budget. It's probably still around, somewhere around there. As grad advisor, you have to recruit students, right? The whole process of recruiting, you got to mentor students, evaluate students. TAs are staff, so you have to deal with all types of staff administrative problems. And one thing I did, it wasn't a caretaker role. My job as grad advisor, it was a multi-year program review. Elizabeth Williams asked me to be grad director. I said, sure, with the understanding that I would overhaul the grad program. It had been about 40 years, really, since the program had been overhauled. And this is what I think the religious studies department needs here. Looking around the Big 12, what are our peer institutions doing? What's the current status, not only in the Big 12, but across the country? Part of that systematic review is identifying what the history department needed, and I would do the same thing for religious studies. So we needed money, and we needed institutional affiliations. So one of the things I started with the help of some generous donors was the Ashley Fund. And this had funds grad student and faculty research, mainly in European history. And I also started the Newberry Consortium. I started out with the Renaissance Studies, and we've doubled in 10 years. I'm pretty proud of this track record because both the Ashley Fund has doubled in the sense that the donors now give twice as much as they gave 10 years ago. And we not only have one, but we have 2 Newberry relationships. So I see that as an assessment of my ability to review a program, see what is needed, and then institutionalize things that long term, I think I did a pretty good service to the history department as grad director. Okay, what is religious studies? How do I see it? Sort of 2 general categories. Religious studies is doctrines and traditions. This is sort of your classic sort of basic doctrines of different religious traditions. And then religion as a cultural phenomenon. The religious studies department, we approach religion academically. It's an interdisciplinary and cross-cultural enterprise, integrating different theoretical schools, right? And there are a whole number of ways to approach religious studies, anthropologically, textual studies, gender, colonialism, post-colonial studies, secularization thesis, different methodological approaches to understanding how religion affects society today. As part of my assessment of where we are at OSU, I'm a historian, so I need some context, right? There's two basic developments and two models for religious studies. There's the traditional sort of seminary model. And this is what you think of as sort of a religious studies department, Old Testament, New Testament, sort of basic Christian doctrines, and then the rest. And then there's the comparative model, which are beliefs and practices of many religious traditions, and then the organization impact of religion in society. And I just pulled out Yale as an example. The Divinity School goes back to the very foundation of Yale. Yale, Harvard, all these Northeastern schools started out as seminary training. Religious studies departments began more or less post-war, large land-grant institutions in the 60s. And I think OSU fits in right about there. I think ours started in the 70s. Right? So our OSU religious studies trajectory is in this comparative model of looking at the next stage, if you will, of religious studies development. Now, I looked at our current offerings, and you see we have this sort of traditional model, right? We have basically Old Testament, New Testament, Paul, early church, and then some others added on. So we're kind of in a arrested development stage. You know, we made it to about the 80s, I think, and then the religious studies program stopped. So we have about 20 years here to make up for, or get us up with our peer institutions. These are our current offerings, and we've hired in these offerings, right? Our two TAPs are basically this traditional model of Hebrew Bible, New Testament, early church. In terms of the current offerings, this isn't comprehensive, but just, you know, scrolling down through all our course offerings. Art classes, history classes, lots of philosophy courses can all be cross-listed in religious studies. So I think very easily we can get the religious studies offerings almost doubled just by what our current offerings are, both in terms of REL classes and then classes in other departments. That's the current state of things, and let's see how we can bring things up to speed in terms of looking at where the program needs to go. We've hired two teaching associate or assistant professors, right, TAPs. And they are these traditional hires, basically Hebrew Bible and New Testament. Some of the things I think probably all the candidates will say more or less the same. We need to have some type of faculty committee, right? We need to get the faculty involved across departments to determine exactly where we want to go as a religious studies program. I would try to get a representative in each of these sort of core departments, have some type of faculty committee. I don't know if the whole nomenclature has to be discussed too. What is a religious studies affiliate, right? How do they get integrated into the program? And then come up with a strategic plan. Where do we want to go? Right? The first thing to do is just to get an idea of the data, right? The current offerings that we have. The TAP process was excellent. Some of the suggestions from the candidates about the courses that we offer and updating the course titles, they're just getting out of religious studies programs so they know what's the most recent course offerings. And then eventually, more towards the 3 years rather than the 1 year, start offering new courses, either change the titles or offer new ones. There's one course I'd get going right away, and this would be a travel study abroad course. I just call it religious sites. Right? And this is a way of both incentivizing faculty to get involved with religious studies, and also as a way of attracting undergraduate and alumni to the religious studies program. Some of the possible courses, you know, travel and study abroad, we could do sort of a New England churches tour, not during the winter, maybe a summer course, right? The Southwest missions maybe during the spring break. And then sort of the big ones, you know, Rome, Jerusalem, Buddhist temples of China, you know, whatever you want to do in terms of study and travel abroad. There's a lot to do in terms of programming, mainly because there isn't much going on right now in terms of programming. film series, art exhibits, institutional partnerships, internships, speaker series, outreach. I don't have time to go through all these. I just want to say a few things about the last two. But for programming, there's a whole array of things that we could do. One thing I would do with a symposia speaker series is to get students to realize that religious studies isn't just looking at these old doctrines, right? So you have we've had some of these already, religion and the environment, right? I just walked by Earth Day on the way to this talk, right? Let's have a symposium for Earth Day on religion and ecology at the same time this is going on. Religion, sexuality, gender, medical ethics, religion and national security. Madeleine Albright's talked a lot about how religion is essential for foreign policy, right? Religious studies isn't some quaint little thing to study. It's essential for national security. I put religion and artificial intelligence on there because a couple of months ago, Pope Francis met with the CEO of Microsoft. And they talked about AI. Right? What is the future of AI, and what does it mean in terms of human experience, right? How can it serve humanity? What we offer, when we offer, who comes in for the speaker series. This is obviously depending on the faculty committee. You'll have to get together and talk about what we want to bring in. There's going to be a long conversation about the Converse Yates-Gate lectureship, how that fits in, reorganize it. But this will be part of a larger discussion for the religious study faculty. One thing in terms of outreach, obviously interfaith dialogues are pretty standard fare. Keep this going. I'd also like to get some undergraduate research projects. So OSU is a land-grant university outreach, right? We got 77 counties. I guess this is right up Tom's alley, right? We need a GIS, right? Oklahoma religious sites. Nothing like this exists, right? Yeah, okay. So get undergraduates. This is also a way of pulling in the community, obviously, right? You go out to the communities, you start asking about their hometown, their churches, or oral history projects. This, I think, also for undergraduate research. This would be an important component of programming. OSU Tulsa, I think this is a big untapped market, right? One thing you could do, for example, would be a speaker series on both campuses. Usually OSU is kind of Stillwater's isolated from Tulsa. University of Tulsa is imploding right now in terms of their humanities program, which might be good for us. I feel bad for TU, but it might be good for us in terms of religious studies programs. 2021 is the centennial of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And OSU Tulsa isn't doing much. What I would like to do is a religion and race symposium up at OSU Tulsa. I know a couple of the pastors in Tulsa. I think hosting this, they actually usually meet once a year anyway. I would just in 2021, I'd get it hosted in Tulsa. And obviously, Tulsa has the museums, so some type of religious art exhibits, both in Tulsa and in Stillwater. Religion and popular music, a nice little symposium, Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan, the Pop Culture Museum up there. And they just redistricted a place, zone downtown Tulsa called the Cathedral District, right? So the College of Arts and Sciences Religious Studies program has a faculty walking tour of the Cathedral District of Tulsa, right? A way of reaching out to alumni and potential students. Cost of business. One of the things that an administrator does is we have to identify what things are going to cost. This is important for identifying also down the road potential donors, right? When you work with the foundation, see how much things are going to cost. I think a travel course subsidy is important. Tom probably knows this better than anyone. The faculty part of travel study abroad courses are the most substantial, right? So if we can remove that from the budget, we can run some of these courses, the speaker series, the undergraduate research fund, some type of grant. All of these are potential naming opportunities, right? So the such and such undergraduate research in religious studies. Work with the foundation. What's the endowment? How much does it need to be? What the budget? How much do we need in terms of annual return? And then long term in terms of endowments for new faculty lines, right? Depends where we want to go. So the last thing I want to talk about is goals, right? Engagement. The program, the directorship, this is new, right? So the director has to spend a lot of time engaging students, engaging faculty, engaging the community, saying that this is a new program, right? We want to have these speaker series. We want you to get involved. We need to develop the social infrastructure, basic stuff, web page, even organizing for these TAP talks and these candidate talks. There's like 10 different email lists going out there, right? One email list, one website disseminating information, building up an administrative infrastructure, right? Guidelines, policies, what does it mean to be a religious studies faculty affiliate? And then institutional partnerships, MOUs. Oklahoma has a great connection with the Museum of the Bible in DC, right? Can we get internships for our students up there, right? And then reach out, obviously, to donors for any research grants. First 3 years, update the courses, get them cross-listed, and then slowly bring them on board with new courses, and then increase programming across the board, right? Increase both the number of minors and the student credit hours. 17 minutes. Okay, any questions? Yeah, Randy.
Yes, I would like to know more specifically what you meant by reorganizing the Converse Yates Kate lectureship, and why you seem to assume that the Converse Yates Kate lectureship should be subsumed within our new program in religious studies.
Yeah, I don't actually. I was stemming off your question from the last meeting, was does this even belong in religious studies? I think that's a question for the faculty. Right? All three used to be religious studies faculty members, but the dean's office, someone needs to decide that this is allocated to this budget. Right? Yeah, Emily.
So you mentioned fostering interfaith dialogue. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how you might go about that.
Sure. There's the local synagogue, mosque, the different Christian denominations around town. There is an ongoing dialogue taking place. I would have something similar both in Stillwater, Tulsa, and also move around Oklahoma, right? Different small towns. Our students can use a little interfaith dialogue, right? Expose them to different religious traditions, and even bring speakers from outside of Oklahoma, right? Different religious traditions, right? Expose them to different ideas, different schools, different methodologies. Yeah.
If you look at the courses that we're offering now and thinking about changing courses, cross-listing, et cetera, can you think of a few holes that you'd like to plug quickly?
Sure. I mean, we're pretty top-heavy in Europe, right? The Judeo-Christian tradition is fairly strong. And frankly, I have no idea what the religious studies program does now. Right? We have adjuncts that teach the Islam survey courses. One thing I would do long-term is make them permanent lines, right? We have these 2 permanent lines in the Judeo-Christian tradition, but I'd like to see one in Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, at least the 5 big, world religions. Yeah.
Follow-up or related question, if you see priorities in terms of faculty hiring new lines, is there like a top priority and then next tier?
Yeah, I would hire someone full-time in Islam. Right? I think that would be the next hire. This gets into the dean's office in terms of their allocation of resources to where they want to hire. But I would start with Islam and then go Eastern. Buddhism, Hinduism. This is where the data comes in. We really don't know. I don't know where our students come from, what they're interested in, what courses they take, what their majors are. This is the systematic review of why are students taking religious studies courses. And then you make your strategic plan based on that.
Do you happen to know if the course on Native American religion is ever really taught, or is it just a course title that exists on paper?
I
don't think it's been taught in the 10 or 11 years I've been.
This is an example of upgrading, because I just pulled that off the website. And so if you're a student looking at the religious studies program, you say, oh, that looks like an interesting course. You go talk to Anthony and it hasn't been offered in 10 years. So either pull stuff off, make it a realistic expression of what we actually teach here at OSU. Because actually it's worse to have something up there that students are interested in and they actually can't take. Right?
Questions?
Yeah, Emily.
Since there's maybe a little bit more time, so I wonder if you could say a little bit more about this idea for a study abroad course on religious sites and sort of building student interest. I think it's a great idea to have a subsidy for faculty expenses,
Right.
Which I assume that's what the budget line was for
Right.
that you're talking about. But I mean, students also really struggle to
Right.
afford even their own costs on top of tuition and other things for that.
Right.
So how do you envision that as a future fundraising priority versus these lines and the speaker series
Right.
and so forth?
I would try to get this going right away. So this gets also to the social media, right? So if we can get a study abroad course going Rome, Jerusalem, somewhere next summer, then we have our nice little newsletter, webpage, students going to these sacred sites. This feeds into this chain of asking donors to fund it, right? So we had 15 students who wanted to go on the trip, only 9 could go because of the expense. Breakdown of the budget, the biggest expense is faculty, right? You take faculty travel off that, subsidize it in other ways, but this is part of the faculty conversation, right? I have no idea what the college budget is, right? They might say, sure, this sounds great, Dave, or no way this is going to happen, right? But this is what I would propose. This would be also, I could see alumni tours, right? OSU, Go Pokes, religious site around the world, right? A way of pulling students in and faculty into the, and also a way of recruiting donors, right? Donors love seeing undergraduate students doing things. The study abroad travel course. I put New England churches in there because Richard Bowles, one of my colleagues, one of his expertise is religious architecture, New England. So where is he? I just volunteered him at home to lead the New England churches tour. I also volunteered him for the downtown Tulsa Cathedral District tour. Yeah.
So I was wondering if I could ask you to speak to what you see as some of the ethical considerations in study abroad course to sacred sites, especially to sacred sites of other religions.
Right. The Native American course you asked about was interesting because I was curious who was teaching that course, and I'd like to know how they dealt with the sensitive nature of Native American religious objects. And it's disappointing that we actually don't have someone teaching that class, because that's what I had in mind to do. We just had a search for Native American history in the history department. And what was interesting about their, the approach to dealing with Native American religious objects, the preservation in museums, the different, even federal laws dealing with the taking these objects out of storage and looking at them. And so my job as director isn't to have all the answers for all these questions. That's my job as director is to pull on the expertise of the faculty. And I guess the first hire, well, when we hire someone next year in Native America, let's get them on board with organizing this sacred sites tour, which will go to my GIS, frankly, for Oklahoma. Let's get an index of what is even in Oklahoma in terms of sacred sites.